Hello, I'm Audrey Lorea,
And I'm Jason Hamlin, and welcome to
the
the
Mixtopia
Mixtopia Astrology
Astrology Podcast.
Podcast.
And if you can't tell, this is our first
This is our very
episode.
first. Yes, yes.
Yeah, we're still getting the hang of it. And actually, we want to let you know that this is less of a formal podcast setting, and this is more of a casual, two very dynamic Gemini
Mhm.
astrologers having casual conversations about astrology.
Yeah, because we naturally do this anyway. We're texting each other back and forth all the time, sending audio messages about what we've observed, and we figured just put it on camera
Put it on
and put
camera,
it out
share
there.
it. Yeah, and share
Yes.
it with our communities. And so part of, as an intro, part of the idea behind the name of this podcast is it's twofold. The first part of it is, and it's something that it's a name I was sitting on for a long time, but a lot of astrologers get the bad rep of being fear mongers, and a lot of, even though I practice traditional ancient astrology, a lot of that school gets the bad rep of being sort of fear mongering, fatalistic, and a lot of the age that we're living in of war and revolution, there's a sort of a grim reality of a dystopia. But and then a lot of the pop astrology folks get a little bit of a bad rep of being a little glossing over too much, like Gemini, this is about to be your era. Pisces, you got it, girl. And so we're somewhere in between. We're somewhere in between.
Yeah.
We're not fully fatalistic over here. It's not a dystopia. It's not a utopia. It's a mixtopia. Hence the
Yeah.
name.
Mixtopia. And we're millennials. We love Utopia.
and we and
So,
there's a little nostalgic millennial throwback there.
nostalgic, yeah. And we just felt like it was important to, you know, it's not fatalistic, it's not, like pie in the sky, but we do feel the power of astrology is to just zoom out a little bit. And I think that if you're able to recognize cycles, I think that's the power of astrology. It helps shift your mindset about what's happening to you in the present, because what's happening right now in the world is so, it's just kind of diabolical. It feels like we're going through a major shift. And if you don't see the bigger picture, it can just feel dire and overwhelming. So we just want to talk about what we're seeing, what we're observing, using astrology as a tool to just comment on what's happening in the day-to-day lives
And
of
to have,
Americans and humans on Earth.
yes, and to have like fun, casual conversations, as
Yeah.
antithetical as that feels to these very
Hmm.
serious, turbulent times that we're having, to have casual conversations surrounding these topics.
Yeah.
And so that it feels welcoming, so that it doesn't feel, I love and respect the academic tradition in astrology, and I'm right there
Hmm.
with that. But I think it's important to also create like a welcoming, supportive environment in community
Yeah.
as we go through these insane times and weather the storm together.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
other
We have a,
aspect, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was
I was just
gonna
gonna
get
say that we get a lot of downloads throughout the day, like um and impressions of what's going on. And I feel like having someone to talk to is a lot help. It's a lot more helpful than only the academic part of astrology. That's very important. But applying that knowledge to just easing someone's mind, I think, is a way that we can contribute as well. Because the conversations that we're having, I feel like a lot of humans are having, except we just have an astrology angle to it for sure.
Absolutely. And I think, the other aspect of the name, is, which we just, since this is our first podcast, is the first time you're meeting us. As we're introducing you to us, this platform and this podcast, I just also uh, want to mention that we're going to be discussing different types of astrology in this space. Although we have our own particular specializations and things that we lean into, this is a place where we mix together seemingly opposing different schools of thought and find that really valuable magical connective tissue between you know, traditional Hellenistic astrology and contemporary or evolutionary, or there's so many different kinds of astrology
Hmm.
and astrologers. And as we progress throughout our episodes, we're also, right now it's just us, and a lot of times it is just going to be us, but we're going to be inviting on guests who have different specializations like Uranian or evolutionary or Joytish or sidereal, etc., so that we can basically find the common ground and find that like
Hmm.
interesting like interwoven remixed connective tissue between seemingly opposing or different schools of thought.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong way to practice astrology. It's just like any other esoteric art. It's all meant to interpret what's happening around us and to apply it in our everyday lives as we can, to recognize cycles. And I'm excited. I'm excited. I have studied so many different types. I tend to lean more whole sign Hellenistic lately, but Uranian astrology is something I'm really interested in. Magi astrology. Audrey mentioned evolutionary astrology, which I would love to dive into a bit more deeply because I haven't in a while. But we're just naturally curious people. We want to hear people's perspectives. We'd love for you guys to reach out to us in our comments or like emailing us on socials, hearing from other astrologers so we can all just kind of transmute that into something that can help humanity or the anybody that may come across this on social media.
Absolutely. We are a community-centered podcast. This is for astrologers, astrology students, astrology lovers of all kinds, and as we've already established, from different schools and of thought and different practices.
Mhm.
Um, and so this is, engagement and engaging with community and leading these sort of casual conversations and inviting in conversation is at the core of what we aim to do here. So we're super psyched. This has been a
Yeah.
long time coming.
Yeah.
Jason and I have been having these conversations for years. And we've
Hmm.
we've known that this was an imminent reality of launching a podcast together, and the stars are finally aligning for us to be
Yay.
here. Shimmies in
I'm
Mercury direct.
excited. Hmm. I mean, and the fact that we're recording on the 21st, it's Aries season, it's the astrological new year. Happy spring equinox, everyone. Like, I feel like, and we can get into this deeper, but we're just moving into a new era, not just us. The entire world is moving into a new era. So, what better time to start a podcast or to just get our thoughts out there? I feel like we've heard a lot from a lot of different people in the news about what's going on, but I feel like we can bring a fresh perspective or just a singular perspective of a person who is observing what's happening to us in everyday life. So we're excited about the podcast. We're excited about the engagement. We're excited to just interface with people in any kind of way and learn because we're Geminis. We're ready to learn as well. And so we want you to come along with us as we do that. We might get a little wacky sometimes, but that's just us. That's who we are. Hopefully you will enjoy it and you can take what you want and leave the rest. So let's get
Let's dig
started.
in.
Yeah.
I think an amazing first segue to that, sort of related to the tone of this new podcast, is we can sort of jump into Neptune and Aries. And tomorrow we have a Neptune cazimi happening. We've got that Sun Neptune conjunction happening. And I think we can talk about that. Let's
Wow.
start with that because I think that that really also speaks to the tone of the podcast. That on this platform, we're gonna have fun and we're gonna be keeping it real. This is very
Yeah.
Neptune and Aries era, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all know many people in the astrology community have been made aware of the historical significance of Neptune and Aries and Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini, the wild trifecta of those
Hmm.
three coming together at once and aspecting one another. But let's dig into specifically Neptune and Aries, because we've spent a lot of time together, all of us in Neptune and
Yeah.
Pisces, and we're
Hmm.
really feeling, given that it's now Aries season in the astrological new year, I feel like we're starting, and given this conjunction tomorrow, I feel like
Yeah.
it's a collective waking up moment.
Yeah. I'm personally so glad that Neptune is now in Aries. I have so many friends that I will text with, like, I can't wait till we can. I don't know if we're bleeping things, but I can't fucking wait until Neptune gets out of Pisces because the amount of fog that I feel we have been walking through has been it's just been it's been tough. And I felt the shift when Neptune first moved into Aries the first time. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for what's coming. And it's fun to watch and observe what happens when Neptune moves into Aries, because Neptune, to me, also, it's like our spiritual ideals. It can influence creative output, not just how much you output any kind of creativity, but the tone that the overarching like popular creativity takes on. um this is kind of random, but we jump all over the place. When Neptune moved into Aries, I you can see it a lot starting to show up in fashion. And Audrey and I were talking about this, like before many times. What does the fact, looking at, if you were to track Neptune throughout the signs, you can start to see the fashion eras demarcated into each sign. And I don't know if you've been noticing, Audrey, but I have been looking at a lot of the fashion runways, and this like breastplate design that I don't know if that was pulled from another era of fashion or what, but I've just noticed it everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's taking on this kind of like breastplate, like putting on the armor. It feels like armor. Schiaparelli has, like has taken off, and I need to look further into Daniel Roseberry's chart, but I feel like in general we're taking on this armor of like, all right, if we want something done, we've got to like put on our armor and do it ourselves, because we've been disillusioned with Neptune and Pisces. We've been disillusioned with the obfuscation of like everything that's been happening to us in our own country, in our own world. So, yeah, this is a really interesting time. The 0 degrees Aries is a spark. It's like a birth of something new. And as Audrey mentioned, a lot of astrologers have been talking about the Saturn Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees. And I don't know. We have no idea what's
Yeah.
coming, but I feel like it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be something totally, totally new.
Totally new.
But
Yeah.
what's
I
your
want
what's your
to,
take on this?
well, I want to speak about that, the fashion and in the way that it's funny. I was telling a friend about a month ago. I do follow fashion, but I actually more so follow like streetwear specifically, and I'm really into like
Mm,
streetwear and streetwear designers also because of um how like non-elitist it is compared, not to shade couture because I love couture as well and high
Hmm.
fashion, but how community centered it is, and how like working class and just different marginalized communities streetwear fashion can be. But specifically, and so it's interesting because like camo and tactical things have always been sort of embedded into streetwear.
Mm.
And we've seen in recent years, like sort of the mainstream popularization of streetwear take off, and sort of like luxury streetwear by celebrities and certain people. But I do think that I want to talk about like the relationship between like practical fashion and like this, and like philosophically the era that we're moving into. So if Neptune and
Mm.
Aries is a moment where we're going to have to all in some capacity fight for our ideals, and
Hmm.
fight for
Hmm.
what we believe to be, right and just, then what does that look like on the day to day in terms of what we're wearing? How does that
Yeah.
shift what, and entering this tumultuous era of the unknown, and perhaps going into an era of war and revolution? How does that show up in the everyday fashion, and how does that show up um
Mhm.
suddenly those really cool looking tactical pockets on your camo pants, which I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing like streetwear camo pants with lots of tactical like cargo.
She ready. She ready.
Super queer girl moment. But super queer woman. But queer woman moment. But yeah, I think that I do think it's an interesting idea of like of how Neptune in a certain sign shows up in pop culture and aesthetic, and how that
Hmm.
mirrors like the collective consciousness shifting. Because
Yeah.
kind of to go back to that Kazemi idea, like so Kazemis are,
Mm.
um, and are a moment of Neptune becomes the honored guest of the sun, and it's sort of a flashpoint moment of clarity. And when we have it with
Hmm.
the outer generational planets, particularly one like Neptune, it's sort of a clarity flashpoint moment of us as a collective getting clear on what
Yeah.
ideals we are going to be fighting for. What are we going to be fighting about?
Hmm.
What is the next step in this revolutionary moment? And that sort of that I'm feeling that shift.
Yeah.
I believe a lot of us are feeling that shift.
Yeah. I agree. And it makes me think about, I forgot who the astrologer was, that talked about just the Kazemi cycles, or just the, why am I drawing a blank? Kazemi,
Mm.
under the beams, combust, that whole cycle is about rebirth.
Is this related to the
Basically,
article that you sent me the other day?
that it's not that they didn't talk
Okay.
about that. That's a
Yeah.
big one too. I'd love to like talk about that a bit more, but the by the time you get to the Kazemi, the planet gets into a Kazemi position. Um, it's like you said, they're an honored guest, and it's a moment of clarity. And the sun really supports that planet in everything that it's doing. And it's always very interesting to think about Kazemi in terms of these outer planets. But I feel like you said, the Neptune being Kazemi is going to provide that clarity. And I think it's very interesting too that not long after Saturn is going to be Cazimi. So it's almost like
Hmm.
crystallizing what is going on, with this whole Saturn and Neptune conjunction.
Absolutely. And yeah, the Sun Saturn conjunction, the Saturn Cazimi coming up, which I'm trying to look at my planetary alignments calendar on the
I can
wall.
even
Thank
alignment.
you. Thank you to Chris Brennan and the Astrology Podcast for my amazing planetary alignments calendar. It's happening soon. I think it's on the 25th, or is it in April? Um, anyway, well, we'll clarify that. We'll clarify that.
Hmm.
Actually, we can do, maybe you can look it up while I talk, Jason.
Yeah.
So because we should get a date for the listeners of what that is. So what I'm getting is that like obviously we have this like Neptune. sun conjunction, this Kazemi moment, this break point in the belief system, in the collective consciousness, the collective dreams. We get clear in our collective consciousness of what we want to fight for, of what's coming up. The
Hmm.
Saturn sun conjunction means we put it into plan. Means
Hmm.
like the structure
Crystallize it.
kicks in. Yeah, it gets
Yeah.
crystallized, it gets made real. And I think obviously Saturn being a malefic and being associated with delays and restrictions, there's a lot of talk about what's going on with obviously in the war and the price of oil and just a lot of people and families across America struggling to make ends meet right now. And
Hmm.
we were already coming into these high gas prices and the high
Yeah.
prices because of the tariffs. We were all struggling already, and now we're enduring this. How much restriction is going to happen? And I always, looking
Mm.
ahead at the year ahead, I always, side note, found it interesting that this Saturn Sun conjunction. Oh, I think the Saturn Sun conjunction is happening very soon
It's
in
on the
March.
25th. Yeah,
I
March
thought I was
25th.
right. Okay, the 25th.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I was thinking about is I think we have a Mars Saturn thing happening in April. And if you want to
Mm.
look that up, I believe that's happening in April. And so always struck me as interesting because I have my eyes, a lot of us have our eyes on April because of the Aries stellium that's happening. But for me, the main read I kept getting, and this is super related to this Aries energy that we're working with and why are we going to take action is and what restrictions are going to lead to us taking action. One thing that
Hmm.
I kept getting an intuitive hit on is as Uranus moves into those final degrees and hits that anaretic degree in April in Taurus being
Yeah.
currency and being a lot of the cryptocurrency that things that came up during that transit. To me, it's so clear that having that in April, along with the Saturn Mars aspect, could definitely lead to some sort of. Everyone's been asking, is the stock market going to crash? Is the AI bubble going to burst? Gold is plummeting. Obviously, the price of oil is going up. Everyone's talking about the petrodollar.
Hmm.
I think everyone's talking about it because everyone, whether you're an astrologer or an economist or a political scientist or a politician or just a concerned citizen, everyone is feeling that something is coming and we are bracing ourselves for impact.
Yeah. I was just gonna say the exact conjunction is happening on April 20th.
Yep.
Is that
Oof.
is the sun gonna be in Taurus? Let me see, is the sun in Taurus that day? Ingressing into Taurus?
I
Let me see here.
the 20th. Mm.
Because the reason why I think of it is because it makes me, when you were talking about restrictions and that Mars and Saturn can be very harsh when
Yeah.
they interact with each other, even if it's a conjunction or a, a trine. It can seem harsh because it's restrictive, because Mars obviously wants to move, it wants to be free, it wants to act when it wants to. And Saturn is just like, nah, let's methodically move forward. But Mars is exalted in the sign Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So they end up eventually being very productive. But it can seem very harsh, especially when you're trying to move, you want to second guess everything. And the reason why I was thinking of the if it's happening around the ingress of the sun into Taurus, that sign is really pointing to us having a lot of physical material kind of restrictions on
Mm.
gas, on just materials that we'd have in our grocery stores. And it actually makes me curious as to what um, that, I mean, we can jump into it, but what that might mean with the Iran war and
Yeah.
what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and like all of the stuff that is currently at play. I see that mostly as a trigger to the next step in whatever, just the escalation of this conflict as far as impacting. us here in America. I mean, anywhere in the world, but we're based in the United States, so I don't
Yes,
know. That could be a big trigger point that day. Um, and I wonder if it
absolutely.
has any ties. I haven't seen any astrology around the recession in the 70s and the gas crisis in the 70s, but I wonder if there's some kind of connection there.
There
I'll
is
have to look into that.
actually, so I actually no, I can tell you there is a direct connection to a lot of economic recessions, and Chris Brennan did great work on
Mm,
this. The Astrology Podcast posted some charts about Mars Mercury conjunctions, which we just had. And so there is
yeah.
real, if you go back to Mars Mercury conjunctions happening in the 20s with the Great Depression and stock market crash,
Mm.
and if you go back to what happened with the gas prices in 1979, 79? Yeah,
Yeah, which was
and it was in the
also
70s.
the
Yeah,
Iran crisis. Yeah, the
yeah,
hostage
which
crisis.
also goes back to our other, reoccurrence transits what we've been discussing lately with the Iranian Revolution in 1979. But yeah, so they're actually, I think that's another thing. And what's interesting is about these Mars Mercury conjunctions versus kind of like a Mars Uranus conjunction. Mars Uranus is like explosive and instantaneous. Mars
Hmm.
Mercury, there's like a series of conjunctions. To me, it plays out like a cycle, almost like an eclipse cycle. So what we start to
Yeah,
see, yeah, so and even if it's not a future Mars Mercury conjunction, it's a Mars Mercury aspect. But I do
yeah,
think that we are, I think we're in the midst of for sure a possible recession. And I think the writing is on the wall. It's a matter of when. And I think
yeah.
that level, that deep level of predictive astrology, that's not what we're going to get into today on this episode. But I think that, it's hard to call exactly when, but I think it's clear that it's happening. And even aside from astrology, so a little background about me, even though, so prior to jumping into astrology professionally, I worked in the film and TV industry for over a decade, but I actually have a degree in international relations and global economics and kind of worked and did research in those spaces. And so wrote my thesis on macroeconomic policy and integrating that with human rights objectives. And so this is funny. So I actually back in, this was the fall of 2007. I was having lunch with a friend and I told him, I'll never forget at a diner, I said, well, we're going to have a recession next year. And this is before I was that deep. I had been studying astrology, but I had a very beginner's level back in 2007. So this was in no way connected to any kind of bigger advanced astrology or mundane
Mm.
astrology predictions. This was purely based on me doing tons and tons of research on global economic data patterns. And I
Hmm.
saw that we had a very likely recession coming up next year in 2008. And I told him, and this was, he was going to NYU and he was super smart and I'm still friends with him. He'll never listen to this. He's not into astrology. Love you. But he was like, we're not gonna have a recession. Like, oh, cute little girl, like a very funny moment. And we did. And I was like, ha ha ha, we had one. Like, no, I wasn't happy that we had a recession, but I remember reaching out to
Yeah.
him being like, I was right. And so I can't help but feel a similar moment right now that,
Hmm.
call it astrology, call it intuition, call it looking at economic data. Right now there's so many different levels of pattern recognition going on. The
Yeah.
writing is on the wall. And so a lot of astrologers have been, and a lot of economists have been just urging people to get stocked up on food and supplies, and mentally prepare yourself for that. So again, not to fear monger, because we're not going to keep going into this too long. We're going to bring it back to a different perspective, and we're going to lighten it up a little bit. But I do want to document that conversation here in this
Yeah.
space and say that for me, April has always felt, in general, I mean, it could be later March as well, but I have had my eyes on April for some sort of, yeah, for the economy to be ever
Something. Yeah.
present, yeah, on our minds in some sort of recession related way.
Yeah. And that makes sense. It just that makes me think about in general. astrology is a tool to help refine um, your observations, and it requires pattern recognition. That's how astrology was created. And so a lot of the things that we talk about in astrology it's not some magical thing that is happening because the planets are moving into a certain sign or in connection with another planet. It really is just providing a language for um, just the consciousness that's kind of going to be acting on its own. And, we can get downloads of psychics and, you can read tarot. You have a lot of these esoteric tools that can tap into that. Just as well as the economics and studying the patterns of a country. It makes me think about when I was in college. I was a freshman in college when 9/11 happened, and I hadn't really started studying this. I actually started studying astrology that year, but before I had even seen the astrology, I had all these downloads. We can get into like my psychic stuff later, some other episode. But I remember thinking, now that I look back on it, we see that Saturn and Pluto were deep, like opposing each other when 9/11 happened. And I knew I felt more overwhelmed at that time about what was going to happen with the country than I do now. I feel like now we're at the end of that cycle. We're just at the end of whatever started kind of at that time. Um,
Mm,
and I feel like that's why what's coming up is kind of just the Wild West, so to speak. So I feel like the recession is happening. Um, but that's kind of the nature too of Uranus moving into Gemini as well. Like it's just kind of like the unknown, but it deeply
yeah.
involves the evolution of America. But this time, that's different from all the other times, uh, includes Pluto being in Aquarius, which is kind of trining a lot of the Gemini energy with Uranus this time. But yeah, it's really interesting to observe and watch and feel and get impressions of things that are going down. Um, and kind of saying them out loud is it's a little strange sometimes, but we get used to it. Between us, we're fine. Like we can talk, but putting it out in public is it can be a little scary because we're not trying to predict anything necessarily. We're just kind of pointing toward the impressions that we're getting that have been validated in many ways
Yeah.
throughout our lives. And so, yeah, if I don't know, I haven't looked at the connections in a while between 2007 and the US Sibley chart, but I'm
Mm.
sure there are quite a few. Obviously, if it showed up so powerfully, it's got to be
Yeah.
some kind of connection. Um,
I haven't either. The only other thing that, I did look at recently was the Mercury Mars conjunctions that led up to that moment. So that's a connection. That's a reoccurrence transit that I think becomes relevant to the conversation. But yeah, kind of moving away from, I mean, here's you and I have talked a lot about because we have had our own experiences being in a have not, like many people in America right now, and many people experiencing uh financial struggles. And I think that one thing that I think is helpful, because again, it's not helpful to root into fear. And let's be clear that these corrupt systems that are on the brink of collapsing want you to be afraid,
mhm,
because here's the kicker, and this is something that you and I have been talking about as we discuss the fall of empire, not just the US empire, but the fall of empire and the fall
mhm,
of and the end of the possible end of late stage capitalism. The people that are should be the most afraid are the ones instilling the fear. They are the ones that have the most to lose.
yeah,
The people that have
mhm,
struggled up until this point so much, like so many of us have the least to lose. And
mhm,
so we actually, and so I think Neptune, and to bring it back, I think Neptune in Aries is asking us not to root into fear, but to root into courage. to
Yeah.
really root into the heroic aspects of Aries, and to say
Hmm.
we are going to be bold, we are not going to be quiet, we are not going to stop talking about the Epstein files, we are not going to stop talking about the truth behind all of this corruption. We are going to, as a collective, bravely face this and endure this together. And that's where Neptune and
Hmm.
Aries starts to really speak to Pluto in Aquarius, and that what we've been
Yeah.
talking about and bringing in. And I was sending you that voice memo the other day about I like the slogan of the Black Panther Party is really on my mind: power to the people, as a Pluto and Aquarius vibe.
Hmm.
This is the power ultimately going back to the people. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we root into, is we root into the courage that we ultimately all have to have, and the hope that this, despite us living in these unprecedented times, historical times, tumultuous, all the things that have been talked about in our community as a collective, and not everyone says, oh, you're fear mongering. It's like, that's not the point. The point
Yeah.
is that this is a time for us to be courageous in spite of harsh realities.
Yeah. And so when I think of astrology and harsh realities, I think of Saturn and Pluto together. And what did we have in 2020, 2023? We had the conjunction of Pluto and Saturn. And
Mm,
that seed planted the kind of what we're experiencing today, because within the broader cycle, Saturn is sextile Pluto. And so that's releasing, that's just the next part of the evolution of the cycle, right? So all of the fear that we experienced at that time kind of woke us up. We were like, okay, something's not right here. I would say there are many marginalized communities that always knew something was not right, and we have been trying to kind of express that. But now we're seeing it, and the decay that is kind of falling away. I think astrology is beautiful because it it shows us kind of, I believe in like a benign consciousness or a universe. And the fact that all of this is happening in the sextile between Saturn and Pluto, um, is helping to usher in this new era with Neptune there, because it
mm,
adds that element of inspiration and letting us know that it's not hopeless. Everything that we're doing. Um, Also, Neptune getting the fuck out of Pisces is helping clarify us. And this Kazemi with the sun is kicking all of that off. That's where this energy is really, um, kind of igniting something within us. For the longest time, for this whole year and just the last few months, we've just been horrified of everything that's happening. But it's very symbolic that we're coming up on, we're experiencing the equinox right now, which is a symbol itself of hope and a birth of something new. And so I'm excited. It seems overwhelming. That's why we also feel like it's time for us to become, like, get on here and just start. We're not trying to spread hope. We're just trying to say, step back a little bit. Let's,
yeah.
look at the broader picture here. A lot of the things that are happening may be scary, but think also about what it's going to be like on the other side, because we don't know what's coming. We don't know how things are going to shape up. But like you said, the power to the people. The best way to predict the future is to create it. As long as we all,
Mm,
like, actively, like, know that we have to change something, and we may not be absolutely clear on the goal, but we know what we don't want. We know where we're coming from, and I feel like that's going to help guide us. And Saturn and Neptune work really well together. They are the most, in my eyes, one of the most complementary, like, outer planet pairings, because it brings the inspiration of Neptune down to Earth. And Saturn ultimately wants, it's exalted in Libra. It ultimately wants what's best for society. It wants that balance. And Neptune wants to kind of reach the ideal, and it's like floating around, so to speak, but it helps expand our consciousness. And so when they come together, and the fact that they're coming together, they came together on the Aries point, just kind of puts an exclamation point on how rare this time actually is for us to just birth a new thing. And I'm really excited because a lot of us are seeing that. We're seeing past all of the fear that's kind of been pushed on us. Um, and I love the fact that like millennials and Gen Z are kind of like all the things that we've learned how to see through on social media prepared us for kind of like this onslaught of misinformation. We lived through so much misinformation, and we're able to kind of see through it. And we may not see the full staircase, but at least we kind of see the next step on how to
Yeah.
move forward. So it's a
Yes.
really exciting time.
And I want to add on to that, millennials specifically, sort of, you know, there are ex-millennials that have the Pluto in Libra placement, but hi, Jason. But there's also, predominantly this Pluto in Scorpio placement, and I want to speak to that as seeing through the fog, because what's at the root of
Mhm.
Scorpio is like diving very deeply into seeing the truth, the whole truth, the ugly, the underbelly, the
Mhm.
underworld truth. And it's
Yeah.
and it's our collective capacity to do that because we've gone through such ridiculous shared traumatic events as millennials, and we've
Yeah.
risen above it every time, and we're going to continue to rise. Related to that, I wanted to bring up a really cool bit of astrological trivia that I learned recently. I can't honestly remember from where I learned it. It was about 2 months ago that I learned it, but it's super relevant to this seeing through the fog and Pluto and Scorpio generation sort of taking on a different role in times of revolution. So I believe that the founding fathers. Okay, I'm putting this in quotes because we know how we know the truth. We
Yeah.
know the truth. Yeah, those of us who are making this podcast, and hopefully those of you that are listening to this podcast, do know the true history of this country, as genocidal and racist as it was. The founding fathers, regardless, were apparently the Pluto and Scorpio generation. And
Mhm.
so they were the elders that birthed a new, quote, America. Um,
Mm.
and so I believe that as we talk about us getting excited and having perspective and taking a step back and rooting into the courage and the hope we need to maintain to get to the other side of these battles, this tumultuous era, I think it's really
Mhm.
cool to know and to remember that we are going to become, our generation is going to become the
Founding father.
elders of that new
Yeah.
era.
Yeah.
And that and seeing through the madness and seeing through the lies and going through the onslaught of collective trauma that we've had to endure together has prepared us
Yeah.
collectively for this moment. We were born for this.
We were born for this, honey. Yeah, like it's just funny. That's why I love astrology too, because if you look at history, things happen in cycles, but look at what pushed them to found and found a new country and declare independence. It was the king that was bearing down on them and being completely unfair. Like it's just beautiful how like astrology can do that, like show that cycle.
Yes, and quick side note about the king. I discovered this little bit of astrology trivia kind of on my own, partially because I am a fan of Bridgerton, and people don't really realize that Queen Charlotte, who marries King
King George.
George, who has mental health issues, although that's completely, fictional and fantasy in the world of Bridgerton, the way it's expressed in that series is based on, those two individuals are based on a lot of really interesting historical facts. Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg was, in fact, a queen of color, and you can look that up. And that's what Shonda
Hmm.
Rhimes so brilliantly brought to our attention. But also, her husband did, in fact, have mental health issues. It's depicted differently in
Hmm.
the series, but there's a really interesting connection to our current Mad King. So, King George was the sitting king during the American Revolution. King George
Hmm.
was a Gemini, and I believe he was a Gemini stellium. I have the chart.
Oh,
I need to pull it up again. I did this
that's
chart
that's
about a month
wild.
ago,
Yeah.
just like our own Mad King, Trump. There's some, and we've got this, and they're both, I believe there's, obviously with the Uranus return
Let me look
that
this up.
Trump is, yeah, well, I've got it. I'll pull it up. I'll give it to you. I did his chart. I did best I could, because I don't know if I had an accurate time so I don't know if the houses are accurate for King George.
For King George,
For King George,
what do
of course,
you?
I've got Trump's. Let me see if I can find that again. It was wild. I'm gonna find it right now and send
I'm
it to
looking at
you.
Astro Theme. I love Astro Theme for
Mm.
George the Third. Seeing this for the first time. Andy the Leo rising, Gemini.
Right, right. Leo rising Gemini. I
Ah.
found some similarities. I posted about it on my threads like 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, something like that. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, so there's an interesting, we can dive more deeply into it.
Interesting.
We might follow up and do a little follow up to that. But if you want to go look it out and you want to do some digging, or you want to come find me on threads, by the way, amazing, amazing community being cultivated by astrologers and astrology lovers on threads. Really loving it. Highly recommend 10 out of 10. Everyone come hang out with us on threads because we have the best time and we break down all kinds of stuff and we have a really great time together over there. And so, that's just
Oh
a
my
side
gosh.
note. I've been managing to like, because you can post the thread and then keep going. I've been managing to have some pretty complex, interesting, mundane astrology conversations happening over there, and just in general, some pretty good conversations. So
What in the world happened? You lost me there. I went to
I
look for
know
the
I was I was like,
girl.
we lost Jason, but I kept talking because
You did
the
because you're
right man
professional.
down. We keep it profesh.
This is
We're
I
fun and we're fresh, but we keep it
let
profesh.
me see here.
um,
This is a different camera, but I'm gonna do this
it looks
camera.
great. You look great.
So now I know that I can't like swipe away like to do a
To
search.
go find something. Okay, I'll do the swiping and the sharing. I've got all of our charts that we discussed in advance on hand and on
Cool.
deck. So we did not plan to talk about that was my wild card. We'll talk about it
No,
another
I love
time.
wild
But
cards. We love it.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're gonna be doing a lot of that, a lot of wild cards, a lot of Gemini moments like that. But definitely look into it if you want to. It's fascinating. I do think that there's some interesting uh I think there's a Mark Twain quote about history not repeating itself, but it does rhyme. And I
But it
feel
does
like that's
rhyme,
another
yes.
one of those history rhyming moments, that there's a mad king on the throne and there's a revolution brewing, and uh the shadow side of Gemini is
Yeah,
madness.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
also Leo, I think Leo rising, and this could be a good segue into, we do have Trump and Netanyahu's chart, who share Mars and Leo conjunct Regulus, and they have some other interesting things. And
Mm-hmm.
so side note, Jason, do you think Netanyahu has passed away? Do you think he's dead?
I think so. You know, I haven't
I
looked
think
into
so
the
too.
astrology of it, but I have just been looking at all the AI things that have been coming out. That's wild. Like that's crazy that somebody thought that they could really try and fool the people with something like that. That to me, that just proves we're in a completely different world. It's like no holds barred. Like people,
There's
they,
different theories developing that perhaps they didn't
ooh,
think they could fool us, that they're using our reactions and our comments online to train AI to be better. That what we're spotting, which is that's a very dystopian
that would,
technocratic
well,
sort of outlook.
I just saw an article, and this is kind of a side note related, that I think it was Google Maps was training it, or Google was like training its AI. Something was training its AI from the Pokemon Go app.
Well, it
Like it
doesn't
was
surprise
training
me.
its
Yeah.
augmented reality to like notice things and to see everything because everyone's trying to like scan things, and they actually use that data to train um like visual AI, which is wild. I mean, there's so many things that this is another part of the era I think we're living in. I think now that Neptune is out of fucking Pisces, I'm sorry, I keep saying it. We are seeing so much of what has been happening around us. So much is
Hmm.
being revealed. I think not only are we moving into a new era, but we're also getting the knowledge that we lost. And what I can't remember what the official cycle or when was the last time that Saturn and Neptune was on Aries. Was like 6,000 years or something.
Well, that's when so there's about 5,500 to 6,000 years ago that as far as we can tell from the software that's been run, that it was at 0 degrees.
At 0 specifically, yes,
Specifically
specifically 0.
0 degrees. I think
Yeah,
the last time that we had a Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries goes back several centuries. I don't have the exact date,
yeah.
but that is not quite as
But
rare.
the
The
zero,
rare
yeah, the zero
thing,
degrees is
yeah,
rare.
and I think more about that and more on that. I was sort of researching what was happening during that era. And you have a sort of the invention of writing, the documented invention of writing
Mm,
in books being made, and then you've got or what we would later become books. And then you've got the first documented examples of humans living in cities, and the sort of
mhm.
the first concept of a nation state. And so when I think of this new era and what it could possibly look like, and we're on the edge of this bold frontier of a moment of
Yeah.
I've been thinking about what does that mean for us as a collective, as humans? Like, are we going to be shifting the way that we share? And I mean, we're already seeing this in a digital era. Are we going to be
Hmm.
shifting the way that we share and learn information? Yes.
Yeah.
Again, sort of correlating to that writing. Are cities going to shift? Are the ways in which, and there's been lots of futuristic visions of this, and that we're not going to get into it, but that really, as like an Afrofuturist fan, like that really makes me think
Love
about
it.
like yes, that really side note. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but like side note Afrofuturism, um,
Yes.
and just try and like tribal futurism, right? Are we
Yeah.
going to is something going to fundamentally shift in the way in which humans live as a society? And
Yeah.
then I think most importantly, not most importantly, but then the third thing sort of being this invention of what we understand to be nation states, is that going to shift? And I think the writing's been on the wall for that for a long time. I think a lot of people have been discussing for years this new world order coming about. And I do think that I do think that sometime within the Pluto and Aquarius era, or Neptune and Aries era, which both of those are fairly long transits, right? We could see some major shift happening in just the overall government structures of these nation states, and the
Yeah.
United Nations taking on a more empowered role of a
Hmm.
world
Yeah.
government.
Yeah, I can see that too. I feel like I wish I knew more about what was happening and had done more some research into what was happening 6,000 years ago. But You bringing that to my
It's
attention
okay.
just makes me think about like no, because
That's
I
okay.
would love to see the
I'm the nerd.
correlation.
Yeah,
No, I love that. I
I
just
only did a
never.
quick dive, by the way, guys. Like,
I feel like if we were starting to learn to write, how much information was lost from the oral history, how much information was taken,
mm,
was declared as not serious because it wasn't written. You know what I mean? Like that's when that kind of started. So I see
right.
the cycle, the end of that cycle,
Which
us,
scares me. Sorry to interrupt you, but like as we
yeah.
become more digitized and as people are reading less, you know, concrete books and as libraries have less of a reverence in our society and all of these things, it scares me. That's what scares me about, you know, anyway. I
Well,
don't
I mean,
I want to
and
preserve that.
so it can be scary, but here's what I think is different. Um, yes, Pluto is in Aquarius and it's, gone around multiple times. The one thing that's different from all of like what happened before is the age of Aquarius. The
Yeah.
age of Aquarius, and
Mm,
so I could see so when I think about Aquarius, I think about a pursuit of knowledge, being observational. It's a thinking planet. It's a fixed air sign, so it is like concretizing thought. So while we are moving into a more digital era as far as our like written knowledge is concerned, I feel like it's we can we're going to be gathering so much knowledge, which lets me know that we're probably going to get a lot of things revealed that either we had forgotten about
mm,
or we just kind of evolved away from. But I feel like the age of Aquarius encompasses a broadening of knowledge. It's going to put it into, yes, it'll be digital, but think of all the things that we don't know yet, or is sitting somewhere, hasn't been discovered. But it that's the beauty about cycles. I feel like
for sure. For
eventually
sure.
anything that was pushed away, it's all going to come to the light. And that's what I'm really excited about as far as like the age of Aquarius. Did Have we ever talked about Kali Yuga, like the Yuga cycles?
We have, and but I want to say one quick thing before we
I
do
don't want to
that.
go
Just
off onto that.
no,
I was just
no.
curious. I was just
We
speaking out
definitely
loud here.
have. Yeah, y'all need
Yeah.
to look into that. But no, that's super relevant to this discussion. But I want to say one quick thing, what you beautifully said about Aquarius. And I'm obviously not that afraid. I just
Oh
have
yeah.
such a
Yeah.
fondness in my heart for physical books and a deep reverence for libraries. So I get very
Yeah.
passionate about that. Um but I do want to bring up, in addition to everything that you so brilliantly said about this age of Aquarius, I want to talk about the traditional rulership of Aquarius being Saturn, and sort of the
Mhm.
aspect of being given like a concrete structure to
Yeah.
these systems of knowledge. And the and yes, in so many ways we get very dystopian in our view of a technological future and AI and the evil robots and all of that. But one little glimmer of hope is that in a digital era, when all of these automated systems that are artificial intelligence are processing and analyzing this data, it is
Hmm.
able to collect and give structure to all of this data that humans were not allowed, were not uh, could not physically do as quickly and as
Yeah.
efficiently. And so I
Yes.
think that that's what we're really seeing. That's one positive aspect of this technological revolution that we're in during this Pluto and Aquarius era. Um, and as much
Hmm.
as we need to be the human resistance to the robots as well, we do need to. I think we also need to embrace that, whether we agree with it or not, or whether we like it or not. This technological revolution is here to stay, and how do we navigate it as ethically as possible and sustainably as possible? And I think that's really where the real conversation has to happen. And
Yeah. I one thing I always think about, Jurassic Park is one of my favorite films of all times, right? And one of the quotes that life finds a way. And one thing that I always think about when it comes to, like the ruling elites controlling us, the rope controlling all that stuff, doesn't take into account the human, the thing that makes us special, which is that we are a resourceful species. We evolved from so many like people and things and objects and microorganisms before us to utilize our consciousness to get around things that block us. And all of that is a roundabout way to say that any of these plans to, I don't know, enslave us, or, like take away our autonomy or anything like that, it always runs up against human nature and the
Mhm.
human spirit to kind of break free of all of that. And I think what's beautiful right now, the internet, for instance, is a very Aquarian thing, period, and look at everything that we have been able to do as human beings. Like it was terrifying, probably. I remember my grandmother, she'd be like, I don't need all that. I'm fine. I'm fine. I lived through
Yeah.
my life without it. I don't need it. But the people needed, move forward. It still exists in the context of the internet. Found a way to make it humanity. It's obviously produced some very ugly things, but I see that with robots and all that stuff. I feel like the power, it's becoming very powerful, AI. And I'm all very grateful that we're waking up at the moment that it is at its most pivotal. And I believe, because I'm optimistic, I'd say I'm a realistic optimist or optimistic realist that human
Yeah.
beings will, we're gonna like, best way to ensure that it doesn't, something is to actively do, like, change it or to actively participate with it, to grow with it, for us to really dive into molding it and shaping it and figuring out what is not working for us. I always say that the best way, everything that Donald Trump, for instance, has done in our government is the best checklist for how we can evolve going forward. We know exactly what was broken and why it was broken, why it didn't hold up. So we're getting our checklist of everything that we need to fix when the time comes, like I won't say if we survive this, because I feel like we will survive this,
Yeah.
And once we get to the other side, we'll have the best roadmap to fix all of everything that was broken. So yeah, it's I mean, I'm an Aquarius moon, so like
Yes.
I love, thinking in those terms. And I'm very excited about it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by everything, but that's, again, I feel like we've had the benefit of knowing astrology or just understanding, even outside of astrology, that things happen in cycles. And if we zoom back and kind of look at it, we kind of needed to go through this fever, and but the fever is breaking. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited about it. I think we'll get through it. It's not going to be easy. We're going to have to figure some things out, and we have to start talking to each other. But once we kind of remove these systems that are blocking our brain from being able to communicate effectively with each other, I think normal human beings, like, will be fine. It's just overcoming these systems that are kind of bearing down on us and kind of
For sure.
blocking our thoughts and things,
Right. And I think that that's like kind of what we were discussing privately earlier today in that piece that I was writing about the fall of empire, the rise of the people. And it's like
Yeah.
one of the reasons we're not fearing the fall of these systems is that we have not
Hmm.
benefited from these systems.
Yeah,
And that once those
absolutely.
systems fall, it actually empowers us to rise.
Hmm.
And so there's this like direct correlation between those two opposing forces. But
Yeah.
kind of want to go back really quickly to something you said. And yes, snapping at your Aquarius moon, we are very air dominant over here.
We are.
Yes, and we both share a Jupiter in its domicile. I have Jupiter in Pisces in the 10th house, heavily aspected by almost all of my personal planets. And Jason has Sagittarius,
Hmm.
Jupiter in Sagittarius. And so we are very Jupiterian in our discussions of astrology and the way that we have an outlook. And so that's why we're both as Saturnian as we are and as pragmatic as we both are as well, we do have that underpinning optimism beneath all of it, and big picture
Hmm.
informed optimism, which is very Jupiterian. And I think that's the backbone of this podcast. And I think it's a very needed voice in the community right now. And I think a lot of people need that optimism.
Yes.
We can face the harsh facts, but we can also approach the future with the ultimate with ultimate hope. And I do also want to say that in relation to this age of Aquarius and this technological revolution that we're living through, I think it's you know, you can look back at every technological revolution or every time that a groundbreaking technology was introduced in society, and there's always fear and resistance to that technology.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that one really hilarious cultural example of this that comes to mind is for those of you that, like Jason and I, love British television. Uh, the series Downton Abbey, and I always think of Miss Patmore in the kitchen and in the early seasons, and every
Oh,
time she's like, oh, we don't need that. Like she's always
oh,
resisting put
yeah.
like an icebox, like a refrigerator or like a
Yeah.
toaster,
They're
and like
terrified of electricity
they're
and like,
so scared. Yes, and like yeah, Dame Maggie Smith so brilliantly
oh,
portrays, you know, the dowager, you know, as like what oh the glare of the of the harsh electricity and the lights. So, you know, I kind of want to laugh a little bit at, I mean, there is like really terrible, unsustainable, you know, unethical realities surrounding AI and technology, and those kinks need to be worked out, and those things need to be addressed. And but I think that technology is not the issue. The corrupt billionaires are the issue. The
period.
tech, yeah, period. So like
Hmm.
that's the lack of ethics and the billionaires and the income polarization and the corrupt systems that be are the issue. Um,
Hmm. There was
those
a, you're making me think about, there's this school of thought around, what are they called? DAOs? I think it's like a decentralized way of governing and using like blockchain to get everyone's votes. I think in Brazil, is it Brazil where they can
Not
actually vote
sure.
online or something? But basically,
Mm,
it's decentralizing a lot of the power and giving it to all of the people. And a lot of that wasn't able to be obviously facilitated without this technology. And so I see every seed that every evil, corrupt, whoever planted in order to subjugate people, life will find a way. And I think consciousness also comes around to, and because I ultimately believe in again, a benign kind of like being and universe,
divine
whatever,
force,
a
yeah.
divine force that wants to see us evolve. And I think it, I don't want to, it's not a fairy tale, people have to do work, but I feel like the inspiration comes around to take the reins when it is the most pivotal time to do so. Right now, with Neptune and Saturn in Aries, you have Pluto in Aquarius, and Uranus is about to go in. And when it goes into Gemini, things are going to start cooking, honey. Like I feel like, and that's when people are gonna be, we're gonna be just like what, a shell of ourselves, just broken from everything that's been happening up until that point, and ready to just push forward, you know? And it's almost like we'll be in fuck it mode. It's like, let's do something different
Yes. Yes. There's
because
something.
everything that we have is not
Well,
working.
there's something so liberating at getting
Yeah.
pushed to that point, to that brink, to that moment of like, I have
Yes.
nothing left to lose. I have no
Nothing.
more fucks to give. I've run
Yes.
out of all of them. They're gone. They're
Yes.
non-existent. There's something so
Hmm.
liberating about that stage. And we are
Hmm.
collectively in that moment. And
We
the
are.
technology.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I see the technological revolution fueling the revolution. And that's the thing that the tech
Hmm.
bros and the billionaires and the oligarchs can't see. They
Yeah.
can't see that these tools that they think that we're going to empower them and put money into their pockets and assist their greed are actually going to fuel the revolution that ultimately leads to their downfall.
Yeah. It's the height of hubris to think that
Yes.
history will not apply to you. What happened with the printing press? Martin Luther,
Mm,
the revolution around like, or the just the ideas about religion and the spreading of information. It was starting to take down all of these empires, you know, and that's what's going to happen this time. I just know it, like, because
yeah.
it's like you can't disprove that this time is going to be different than every other time in history. That's why I also appreciate astrology. It's like, all right, we can look at the cycles. Can you deny that this actually happened on this cycle? Like, to astrology and say that it's a woo-woo thing, that's changed a lot with people in
Yeah.
the modern era, because we can communicate astrology in a way that shows how scientific it can be. Not scientific, but like how cyclical it can be. I
Yeah.
love um, Tarnis's book Cosmos and Psyche. When I
Yes.
read that book, it changed my whole perspective. You know, I couldn't stand in a certain way because I studied political science in college, and the I was really into generational politics and how things happen in a cycle, specifically here in America. And when you start paying attention to the cycles, you can't unsee it. It's all going to be there. That's why with people like us, like it kind of filters into everything we do, every observation that we make, every conversation that we have is based on cycles. And if these billionaires feel like they aren't the kings and queens and dukes of like medieval, yeah,
Yeah.
like Europe,
Yeah.
then I don't know what to tell you. You just aren't a student of history, you know?
For sure.
It's
And the fact that Richard Tarnas is a historian, a renowned historian, right? Like it speaks to that. What you and I have spoken about privately. I've talked about astrology being sort of a soft science and a social science. A lot of people say, well, it's not science. Well, a lot of science is involved, actually. A lot of mathematics is involved, a lot of
mhm,
different obviously astronomy, philosophy, world history. There's so many different other academic fields of study involved as a
mhm.
backbone to astrology. But I think it's really interesting. I got a copy. I got another copy because I think both of us had got, like, for one reason or another, no longer had our copy of Cosmos and
Oh
Psyche,
yeah,
and
I
Psyche. And
gave our friend, yeah.
I'm actually revisiting it and rereading it right now because I got another copy and it was on my mind to read it because of conversations I was having. And I think it's very poignant that he was a social scientist. He's a historian, and we look at the
Yeah.
social sciences and the overlap of the social sciences. And you and I both studied social sciences in undergrads, and I have my degree in those
Yeah.
areas. And I think that that's very Geminian. It's very Jupiterian to look at like sort of the look at like a multidisciplinary approach to understanding patterns. And I also
Just
just
a
want
quick
to,
interjection and question.
yeah.
Did he originally start studying? Did he start studying astrology to disprove it? I feel like that was a part of the
I
lore
think
of that. Like
I
he,
think so. I think
Maybe I'm making
so.
that up,
I
but I feel
don't.
like that was
No,
a
I
quote
don't know
somewhere.
for sure. That's fascinating. If you know about that, feel free to let us know in the comments or reach out to us. But I don't know for
Yeah.
sure. But that would actually make sense. And it's the intro, revisiting it, and just the first few chapters reads like that. He's certainly addressing skeptics, and he's
Yeah.
certainly addressing it from an academic perspective. And in fact, I actually
Hmm.
recommended it to a cousin of mine that I'm very close with, who's another Gemini, but he's been my a constantly vocal skeptic my entire adult life, or really since I was a teenager when I first got into astrology. He's been that skeptical voice in my life. And only recently have, I was sort of going into the nitty gritty of mundane astrology, and just like kind of hitting him over the head with a lot of advanced astrological concepts, and telling him about the reoccurrence transits and Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and all these things that we're all talking about as a community. And he just listened, and he was like, "Oh." And that this is it was because of that. I think I'm actually getting through to a skeptic, and I recommended Cosmos and Psyche to him. I
Hmm.
said, "This is
Yep.
the book that you need to read." And it's one of the reasons my conversations with my cousin, because he's a super brilliant guy, very like, very science brain. He's an engineer. Um, and it's just one of those people that, again, has always written it off. And he was like, well, somewhere in the midst of that conversation, he said, well, it's not like you can read textbooks on this. And I said, of course you can. There's hundreds and
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of books. I said, up until the 18th century, you could study astrology at Oxford. And actually, the University of Wales is offering a master's in astrology, cultural astronomy. We have Kepler College. I think a lot of people don't understand the academic scholarship tradition
Yeah. Oh my
of
gosh. Yes.
and a
There's
lot of
so
people
much.
outside of this world don't know that. And so that
Yeah.
inspired me, because a lot of and no shade to the pop astrology people, and who people who only know their sun sign or a few placements, all good. Come along this journey, learn what you can, read what you can. But I because of the popularization of astrology in the Neptune and Pisces era, which was very surreal to go through for some of us who were in this who were very much astrology students before that era. um I think it's important to understand the and hold reverence for this tradition, this scholarly
Yeah.
tradition that has thousands of years
Hmm.
of studying and writing and reading and teaching
Studying, running
behind it.
observation,
And
and
that's
yes.
what inspired me to create that spreadsheet that I'm sharing, that's a free resource for the community. It's astrology reading list. It is only right now, I've only got like 170 something titles. I know there's a lot more to be added. I know there's probably typos. Bear with me. This is the living document, and it's a free resource that I'm trying to provide. Um, we're going to be adding to it constantly, and send me any and all recommendations. And we want it to be as inclusive as possible. But yeah, so that this is one of those things that I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are slowly realizing. People that maybe are beginner astrology students, or people that are just loosely associated with or aware of astrology, or people that have always been skeptical of astrology. I think that there's a growing, which is something I've wanted for a long time. Many of us have wanted for a long time. There's a bit of a growing
Hmm.
legitimacy around astrology, which is
Yeah.
why the New York Times had to put out that article it does. And there's always some sort of mainstream article that's put out, I think, every 5 years or so. Chris Brennan's talked about it. But oh, your sun signs actually change. It's like, yes, we know precession exists. We've known for thousands of years that
Yeah.
precession exists. That's not the point.
Well, this, my ADHD, I'm like jumping all over the place, but it's always connected, right? But when you were talking about your cousin, I realize now I haven't really ever publicly talked about astrology. And I think we've talked about this a little bit. We've touched on it, how um this is basically us coming out, right? Like, my
Yeah.
family does not know how deeply deeply knowledgeable I am about astrology and the fact that it is a kind of a big part of my everyday life. Like, I'm not like always trying to predict things or anything like that, but it helps me understand the world sometimes that's happening around me. And, I don't think about it every single day, but like if I'm thinking of something like random or I'm seeing something happen, I always kind of tie it back to the cycles. And it's again a very scientific, because science isn't always just about science. The scientific process is just adding some rigor, it's being observational, and like drawing a conclusion. Basically that's it. And that's literally how astrology was built up over the years,
Right.
people taking what their generations and generations and centuries before them and iterating on that. And so it's always fascinating for me to talk to people who have an impression about astrology being this kind of like, they like people say woo woo, like a woo woo thing, and while it is, it just fully encompasses everything that humans encompass, which is they can be very like physical, they can be very high minded and elevated, and it could be very instinctual many times. But there are a lot of for instance, Magi astrology, and I like to read Magi Helena, who is kind of starting her own thing in Genesis astrology, but she pretty much talks about it just being scientific, and and she really leans into the fact that they developed, they evolved from astrology just with their own observations. And on her, I think it's Genesis Astrology. It's a new website that she's kind of creating because she's, evolving from the Magi Astrology School. It's a whole big thing, but basically she talks about only concluding something about a planet or its implications from and through observation, and multiple times, like making sure that that rigor is there to determine what to declare about this planet through its behavior and how it's been impacting everyone around you. So it's something that my kind of the scientific side of my brain really latched onto, because I'm very much like a um I I'd like to say I am a free spirit in many ways, but and I'm a creative naturally, and but I like the spiritual side of things. I like um diving deep into the other side of this physical plane, because that's where we mostly exist.
For
It's
sure.
it's just a fascinating thing to study and to
Yeah.
observe. And it's always very interesting when I hear people discover, when they give me their impressions on it when they discover it for the first time, or something deeper than just their sun sign actually clicks. Like when I discovered astrology for the first time, I mean, I knew about like my sun sign, in high school, but I
Yeah.
had a friend in college that was like, "Do you know your rising sign?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And she was like, "I think you're a Leo rising. I would guess that you're a Leo rising." I was like, "I have no idea what that means." But when I read the description, I was like, "Oh, yeah, that I can see that." And when she did my chart, I was like, "How did you know that?" Like, how? She was like, "It's
Right.
just, it goes deeper than that." And I
Your
was like, "Wow,
appearance.
okay." And
Yeah.
that kind of like clicked off. That just kicked off a big thing for me. And yeah, it's just,
I
I don't know.
I love
I'm rambling at
origin
the point.
stories. No, I want to
Origin.
I want to talk a little bit about a few things you just said. So, I love origin stories, and I've actually included my astrology origin story in my bio on my website. And for me it started because of my love of books and my love of antiquity. I was a big history nerd always, and I was always sort of like dreamily imagining myself in ancient Greece or ancient Egypt. And I was like hardcore into mythology when I was studying it in school. And so I used to frequent this used bookstore downtown, it's still around, and where I'm from in my hometown, Texas. And I was looking at some bargain bin, like these are half off, this is like it was just like a book of like a random books. And I found this It was actually a relatively new book at this used bookstore, and it was like recently published, and it was just sort of like, I don't even remember, and I wish I could find it at my mother's house. I'll probably find it one day. It was probably just the most like generic intro to modern astrology book you could find, but I read it in one sitting, and like that was it. I was like hooked. I was
Yeah.
hooked, and that was it. It was the book, and then I was blessed with my a couple of roommates. One in particular in college was really into it, and right away I was like, I'm a Gemini. I'm a Gemini. Well, I'm a Gemini. Well, I'm a Cancer. Well, I have Cancer planets. And we were like, and that synthesis that happens, and that was back in. So I found the book in 2001 or two, which is crazy because I think it was around the same time that we were, even though we didn't know each other then, I was getting into astrology. And it's, yeah, so it's unbelievable that you and I have been, and so this is to say, everyone, our faces might be new, our faces and our voices may be new to you in this public space, but Jason and I are not new to astrology, okay? And we may not
Yeah,
have some
it's
kind of
roots of this.
yes, and we may not presently have some kind of formal certification or affiliation. That's likely shifting as we both become more public with our practice and our astrological discussions. But we are not new to this. We both have been here studying and rooting in deeply into astrology for over 2 decades. And
Mhm.
I also want to say really quickly that in honor of the late Lee Lehman, who just recently passed away, astrologer who just passed away a couple of days ago, who was a professor at Kepler College, she, I think, said at one point that because she was one of the first openly gay women astrologers in our community. And she said, as an astrologer, you have to come out twice. And when you're also
Yeah.
queer. And so, since we're also queer astrologers, I actually,
Hmm.
I actually did sort of recently come out very awkwardly to two out of my four parents. One set of my parents knows fully well who I am, and they've known that for a long time. But I have very Gemini stellium, Gemini dominant mutable thing. I have two sets of parents and two families, and one of my sets of parents that I did not really grow up with, who are very Christian and MAGA and, conservative. I
Mm.
just sort of randomly the other day on the phone, on the weirdest phone conversation of my life, was like, well, I'm a professional astrologer now and taking clients. And we could talk all day long about how it's not witchcraft in every instance, and how there's a deep, rich, interesting history and tradition of Christian astrologers, and the wise men were actually magi. And I guess it was just sort of like
Yeah. Oh my
trying
God.
to
Yeah.
sell astrology to these very conservative Christians that are my parents, and two out of the four of my parents. So funnily enough, yes, astrologers who are also queer sometimes have to come out twice, and I test piloted very awkwardly the first uh coming out phase of trying to come out as an astrologer to people who really, really it definitely did not go well. And I don't know if I probably should have planned that out, or like
It
timed
just
it
needed to
out.
come out. It
it,
needed to
it
come
did it did when
out.
it did. Probably I think I rushed it, probably because we're launching this very public platform, and I was like, whatever, this is who we are,
Yeah.
this is who I am.
Well, it's funny because like, we are friends, so we kind of know a bit of our backstory, but I grew up in a very religious, not super religious, kind of background in the South. And but my mother was always very encouraging of like my psychic impressions, my dreams, and she'd be like, "You have the gift," and all these things that I was dealing with growing up. But obviously, I wasn't, um, it wasn't like I was a practicing psychic. But like I would practice more privately with friends, but never like tell me what's going to happen in my future, like that kind of thing.
Right.
But I feel like it was very much ingrained in in specifically within the Black church, that you could be receiving things. There is this whole side of things. It didn't matter if it was a religious thing or if it was just spiritual, that you can receive information from a higher being, and it could influence you. Like if you use that to influence the choices that you make, it's a very positive thing. But astrology was always seen as, like you said, like some kind of like witchcraft, or and it was never like specifically brought up, but it was like with tarot cards, like if you had tarot cards, we're like, oh my god, those are like devil cards sometimes. But it wasn't like drilled into us, because they couldn't deny that other spiritual aspect that made even less sense, than like a scientific word, like astrology. You know what I mean? Like, didn't make sense. But yeah, it was just one of those things that I never outwardly like speak about with my family, because when I practiced or did readings, it wasn't like a public platform that I was doing that on. It was just something that, I had, my personal, clients, or um it was all word of mouth. It wasn't like I had a website or anything. But yeah, it very much feels like with this podcast, it is a coming out. Um and I think it's just we're at a point now where everybody has to utilize their God-given gifts to just move forward into a new era. We're just at that point. Anything that felt like it was set in stone is just it's been ripped up. And why not use your gifts? Why not move forward in a way that feels natural to you? I feel anything that people taught us about assimilating and getting, being like everybody else, it has so much to do with the manufacturing kind of the industrial revolution mentality, where it's like you
Mm,
have to like be like everybody else in order to move society at in a way that keeps everything in balance. But life happens. Where we are now, everything is so out of balance because it is calling for change. And we're gonna meet the moment, I think, because it's like, if I think millennials learned early on, like we were the first, aren't we like the first generation that is doing worse than our parents?
yes,
It's
yes,
like,
like
so it's like,
economically,
yeah,
statistically, we are the first.
economically.
And there's so many firsts for millennials. We're the first generation that didn't skew conservative politically as we got older. We're the first
Hmm.
generation that is, of course, doing worse off economically than than our predecessors and our parents. We're also the most educated
Mm.
generation.
So we did what we were
And
supposed
then,
to do.
yeah, it kind of peaked because now the literacy and the education rates are going back down after us,
Oh my gosh.
because we are that bridge
Yeah, that's
generation,
true.
because we
Yeah.
were born into an analog world and came of age as the digital world was coming alive, and now here we are in our, full on in our adulthood, entering some sort of midlife crisis era of sorts,
Hmm.
collectively together as we embark on this brave new world of a revolution. And so yeah, this Mixtopia podcast is for you millennials, and it's also for it's for us. It's also for I think it's for every generation, let's be clear. But it is a little bit of a conversational love letter to those of us, and sort of like a community space for us collectively going through some
Yeah.
things together.
Yeah, we're just making sense of the world basically through, and everyone, as everyone is, through the knowledge that we have, our lived experiences, our observations, and yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing here on the Mixtopia Astrology Podcast. That there were so many. It sounds like we're wrapping up and we're coming to the
It
end. There were
feels it
so
feels
many things.
So many things that we will have to get to next time, and I
Yes.
think they're yeah, we're gonna, on future episodes, we're gonna be breaking down the US Sibley chart, where we're looking at Trump and Netanyahu's chart. We've also been together, we've been cross-referencing some other charts. Jason pulled, if you want, Jason, want to talk about some of
The
the other
attack
charts
for
you
the
looked at?
yeah, we were talking, we had a trajectory we were planning for this podcast, but we let nature take its course here on the
Yeah.
Mixtopia Astrology Podcast. But the Iran strikes, the announcements of the Iran strikes made by the U.S. chart, and comparing it with the Pearl Harbor attacks chart, there's a lot of connections there between those two charts and both of those charts to the
You
Sibley
know,
chart.
I'm glad that we're
Oh,
pausing on that, because I think that we should also pull the chart for 9/11 and throw that in the
mm,
mix as well, for Pearl Harbor and for the attacks on
yeah,
Iran. I think that we
yeah.
should, because it feels, I think 9/11 is on everyone's tongues for a reason. And I think even Iranian officials were saying recently that I think there was a pretty senior security, I'm not sure what his rank is within the Iran government, was saying that, essentially saying that, warning the American people that the US government is going to
Mhm.
pull a 9/11 against its own people.
Yeah, yeah. That whole thing, it's false flag attacks and these types of
Yeah.
things. I feel like there's still more information to be revealed about 9/11 in general. Just like
In a
there's more
mainstream
information
way. In a
in a
mainstream way.
mainstream way, in a mainstream
Yeah.
way. I think that the what's happening here is we're going to get full dimensions of our lived experience, of our history in this country, and so many people are waking up. And the term woke was taken and made into some other thing, but like originally it means that you're aware and you to your surroundings, you have insight on what happened to lead to the point that you're living in, whenever. And I feel like we're really going to be waking up. This Saturn conjunct Neptune at the 0 degrees point in Aries is just a wake up call. It is a wake up call. It's a birth into something new, because how do you get somewhere new is to have clarity. You wake up, you see what's actually in front of you, and we can move on from there. So we have some
Yeah.
interesting things going on. There's a lot that swirls around. Of course, we talk pop culture. We'll talk about fashion, as we talked about today. But all of these things and how it weaves into the human experience is what fascinates us as two Jupiter, like in domicile dominated people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited. I feel like
I am too.
today we really hit on some high level things, and it gives you a feel for the tone we might have and take the winding road we may
Yes,
take.
and while
But
we
that's what life is.
absolutely, yeah, and while we totally respect the other, we love and respect the other podcasts that have a more structured, on, theme, approach, and a more
Yes.
academic approach. We love those podcasts where we love, we respect them. We just decided together to take a different approach, that we wanted something that felt, for us personally, accessible,
Hmm.
welcoming, fun,
Conversational.
conversational, and real. And to wrap it up, we were talking about like Neptune and Aries vibes, keeping it 100.
Hmm. 100.
We keep it 100 on this podcast. We keeps it real with you, and it's because we love you, future audience and community to come. So thank you, Jason. Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
such,
Audrey.
yeah, thank you for being just an amazing light in my life. I think, I'm just so grateful that we're embarking on this journey together, and I can't wait
I am
for
excited
all
too, and
that's
I'm
to
so
come.
thankful for you to be in my life, friend. We've been through some things, and I'm glad to be having this conversation with you. I'm really excited. I feel like it was meant to happen for sure.
Yes. All right, everybody, stay safe, stay sane, stay aligned and blessed, and we'll
Hydrated
catch
and
you soon.
moisturized.
That's right. Thanks for listening.